aliens are actually already here right before our eyes. This statement, as strange as it may sound to you, is one of the plausible hypotheses that could explain why. When we scan the sky in search of intelligent extraterrestrial civilizations, we neither see nor hear any, even though there should be thousands of them. In fact, many factors lead us to believe that our galaxy, like the entire universe, should be filled with a great number of other intelligent civilizations. Many researchers believe that, given the considerable number of potentially habitable worlds that have recently been discovered, our galaxy alone should host several thousand extraterrestrial civilizations. Right now, extraterrestrials are found in our books, our movies, our myths, but so far, we've never actually encountered them. In reality, do you hear that? Listen closely, there's nothing to hear. The cosmos is silent, and that's not normal. And to explain this apparent anomaly, better known as the Fermi paradox, a large number of hypotheses try to make sense of this great silence. In the previous episodes, I encourage you to go watch them. The links are in the description. We took a close look at two equally frightening hypotheses: the so-called Great Filter and the Hyperpredator civilization. But many other plausible explanations exist and try in their own way to explain this paradoxical radio silence. That's why today, I'd like to discuss with you the hypotheses that accept the existence of a large number of intelligent extraterrestrial life forms. But they start from the basic assumption that none of them wish to or are able to communicate with us. And that's for a whole bunch of reasons, which, as you'll see, are each unsettling in their own way, and for some, raise questions about our own destiny. Among these hypotheses, there are those that say that, in reality, extraterrestrials have already visited us. They have already come to our planet, but in very distant pasts. They landed, maybe scared a few dinosaurs or other now extinct species, with whom they might have even tried to communicate in vain before leaving. We can even go so far as to imagine that this happened some tens of thousands of years ago. They landed somewhere around there, came across a few tribes of hunter-gatherers whom they found not very interesting, and then left. While our ancestors, lacking writing, eventually lost the precise memory of these disturbing encounters over time, which persist in the form of distorted stories in our myths. Or maybe the extraterrestrials are us, or more precisely, we are their very distant descendants. In any case, that's the explanation proposed by the directed panspermia hypothesis. According to this, billions of years ago, extraterrestrials traveled from habitable planets to other habitable planets to fertilize them. They planted some primitive spores there before leaving, letting evolution on our world follow its own winding path. So, in a way, we would be just like all living beings currently on this planet. The result of an experiment that turned out well and, in our case, eventually produced intelligent beings, very distant descendants of the extraterrestrials. Unless they are still here, right before our eyes. But we would be unable to identify their presence, because their technology or their material nature is so different from ours that it hides them. Or else a possibility that we might call terribly vexing. Thousands of other extraterrestrial civilizations really do exist. They have identified us and are capable of communicating with us. But let's say that the cognitive and technological advancement of our civilization, according to their criteria, is so pathetic compared to the best of what they have that none of them bother to pay attention to us for now. Even our greatest achievements, our most beautiful scientific advances, our most powerful artistic creations, don't spark any curiosity in them. Our species, both boring and predictable, would be for them the equivalent of what amoebas generally are to us. At best, insignificant, at worst, uninteresting. Unless our galaxy is indeed teeming with advanced civilizations, most of which are trying to communicate. But we still don't have the proper means to listen. We're sort of listening just off to the side, either not listening properly or not looking closely enough. In other words, it's the argument that extraterrestrial life might be too extraterrestrial, too different in the way it exists, thinks, and communicates, from everything we're capable of imagining. Well, try to imagine a species with a very long lifespan and, let's say, very slow movements. We can easily imagine that they might have developed ways of thinking about and perceiving time that are very different from ours. That their message, in trying to communicate with us, could very well be spread out over extremely long timescales. And their way of saying hello could stretch over months, and their message could go unnoticed, like background noise, impossible to decipher. So, the deep gaps separating us from extraterrestrials could be measured both in the distance between stars. But they could also be technological, linguistic, cultural, or even beyond anything we are capable of imagining. To describe what separates us from them, let's pause for a few seconds on the technical aspect alone. When you think about it, extraterrestrials might be trying to communicate with us through channels to which we are deaf, channels that are too subtle or difficult to perceive. For us, given our current level of development, such as subtle gravitational waves or extremely difficult to detect particle signals like neutrinos, or even by passing through levels of reality that even the wildest of our physical theories haven't dared to imagine. So, in a way, we would be for them a fledgling civilization, still wriggling in its cradle and trying to listen to the sky using technology, which, compared to what they have, is like two tin cans connected by a string. So this radio silence that some, listening to nothing but their own despair, attribute to an empty universe, would actually be the sound of our ignorance. Or maybe there really are hundreds of thousands of other worlds, all inhabited by species just as brilliant and fascinating. But their genius, all their great works, do not manifest themselves through the construction of structures on the scale of star systems, by building ships or mastering radio communication systems. On the grand scales of the cosmos, other extraterrestrial civilizations do not travel between the stars, do not emit any signals, and cannot receive any. They could even be, in a sense, technologically primitive. And yet, all of them could have developed over the course of their long history concepts, ideas, a philosophy of life, a sense of humor, and intelligence without equal, which would be, if we met them, foreign and inaccessible to us, just as the immensity of space is beyond our understanding. We can also imagine that civilizations that thought about sharing their ideas toward the sky were stopped in this endeavor by various obstacles. Some may have appeared on planets extremely poor in metals, and therefore were never able to enter the age of machines. Others may have appeared on worlds entirely covered with water, and these species, kinds of octopuses or dolphins, version 2.0. In the absence of better images to offer, are and will forever remain unable to build their own radio transmitters. And for us, it's the great silence that no one comes to break. We can even go so far as to hypothesize that this desire, this curiosity, which seems to somewhat characterize humanity, and it seems that, throughout time, this has driven women and men to try to find out what's on the other side of that hill, the horizon, or the solar system. This may be an exception, and not a trait shared at all by other intelligent civilizations that inhabit our galaxy. The majority of them might very well have the technical means necessary to come and meet us, but their desire, their motivation, could be drastically different from ours. For the simple reason that reaching out to others has never been in their nature. They would have, in a sense, knowingly given up on searching. Having in their psyche principles that make them reluctant to even consider communicating with others, whether out of fear or simple disinterest. Or maybe for a whole host of reasons these civilizations are extremely diverse and morally opposed to exploration. Maybe they have a stellar-level homebody phobia, they prefer to stay on their home planet and keep quiet. They are capable of spreading throughout the galaxy, but have consciously decided simply not to do it. When I think about the number of times I stayed home without answering the phone, when I preferred to lounge on my couch rather than go out and discover the world, I almost intuitively grasped the power of this idea. Deep down, who says that the interest of other civilizations in the question of whether there are other forms of intelligent life elsewhere isn't close to zero? In the same vein, there is another hypothesis that I personally find as terrifying as it is appealing, and which, according to some, could explain the Great Silence. By the fact that, after reaching a certain level of technological development, intelligent extraterrestrial species would invariably end up gradually losing all interest in the outside world, until they are absorbed by their own invention, by virtual reality environments, far too advanced in mimicking the reality they would have ended up creating. Thus, and inevitably, any advanced civilization would, over time, make the deliberate choice to withdraw from the physical world. Their world. Their digital world is their artifice, offering them almost infinite possibilities for experiencing life. Gradually, it has taken precedence over any desire to explore reality. And the living beings of these great civilizations would all have come to migrate from a biological nature to that of digital spirit entities, evolving in silence within environments that increasingly mimic an alternative reality adaptable to their every desire. Thus, extraterrestrials who have abandoned their physical bodies would become extremely difficult to detect. Once again, think about how many times you didn't go out all day because of the internet, or that a series to binge watch had, on paper, cooler things to offer you than reality. And now think about the power of virtual worlds malleable according to your desires. Worlds without suffering and permanent death, offering more possibilities for escape and adventure than the entire universe. Drawn in by the hypnotic power of their inventions, these digital beings would have ended up completely immersing themselves in them, abandoning a universe in a hostile and cold reality, only to thrive in artificial digital paradises, living nothing but inner journeys. And now, once again, there is a great silence. Except that it only takes a single civilization that hasn't followed this path, a civilization curious about others or a bit expansionist, to shatter this hypothesis and turn the great silence into noise. Who, as you may have noticed? Unless it's us who are. In a computer simulation running a program with a universe that hosts only one form of intelligent life, namely ours. And this lack of noise is only due to the limits of the program. And where it gets truly disturbing is that this simulation could even be controlled by an extremely advanced extraterrestrial civilization, trying to answer the Fermi paradox, or at least to decide between various hypotheses. And in doing so, the latter would run billions of simulations, including different forms of life, to determine their ability to venture into space, to search, to communicate. And thus, for example, to know precisely what proportion of these species might, for instance, display predatory or belligerent behaviors. I'll refer you to that episode. In fact, this simulation hypothesis fits with all those that assume we don't see extraterrestrials, because we're completely missing the point. Because the very nature of reality escapes us, and nothing we think is true actually is, because the universe in which we don't see them is just a hologram, an illusion, a dream. And as a result, it's impossible to know if we are in vats connected to the Matrix, or if the vast starry sky is actually fake. Like in the planetarium hypothesis, which assumes, in the style of a Truman Show 2000.0, that a civilization with unparalleled power, amusing itself by hiding its existence from us, has built a gigantic planetarium around our planet. Honestly, aliens really know how to have a good laugh. In this category of hypotheses, we also find the age-old and more classic conspiracy theories, according to which there really is contact. But the governments are hiding them from us, so as not to hurt our sensibilities. By learning that extraterrestrials really love to come visit our planet, but mainly to come and mess with people against their will, the farmers from the depths of Arkansas. Let's note in passing that, as crazy or wacky as they may be, these hypotheses also cannot be completely ruled out as things stand. Just like those that suppose that extraterrestrials in great silence are studying us with kindness and from a respectful distance in a sort of galactic zoo. So, according to this hypothesis, superior civilizations fully aware of our presence do exist in great numbers. But if we have never encountered them yet, it's because we are in a galaxy that is strictly regulated by an authority within which the great galactic powers have collectively decreed in their charter, unanimously signed, that it is strictly forbidden to disturb the course of history of small civilizations, those still at the first stage of their development. And by doing so, they have, in a way, dedicated a part of space to us. A vast protected galactic park within which it is strictly forbidden to interact with us, the primitives. How many times have I told you not to play with the cockroaches that have reason? A bit like if it were written in big letters above the solar system. Look, but don't touch. Or more precisely, do not interact with this species until it has. And here, you can have fun filling in the blanks with whatever you like. Grow up a bit and stop messing around. Stop messing up the surface of their whole planet. Get past the Silicon Age and upgrade the internet. Reach a level of development higher than Exibord. Groot was able on her own to discover our presence. So, making certain breakthroughs in technological innovation, scientific discoveries, politics, ethics, or even philosophy could be a way to convince these civilizations. that we are not only interesting to observe, but that we also have interesting things to say and to share. And it's only once we have, through our actions or discoveries, proven ourselves trustworthy, that we will be able to open the door of this galactic zoo and leave behind our current status as cosmic guinea fowl. To sit at the table with the great ones, and above all, to put an end to this endless digression in the bestiary. Plausible hypotheses to explain this great silence. So that finally I shut my mouth. I think you've understood. I love the Fermi paradox. Especially since it allows for hypotheses that, at first glance, seem totally far-fetched, but often turn out to be extremely interesting. When you take the time to dig a little deeper into the question, and all things considered, I wonder if the craziest thing about all this, it's not that among all these possibilities, each crazier than the last, at least one of these scenarios is almost certainly true. In any case, and whatever your point of view on the possible solutions to the Fermi paradox, it still remains completely open and mysterious to this day. Are we extremely alone, absolutely alone, or are we surrounded by a great number of other civilizations with whom, for various reasons, no channel of communication has been opened? One thing is certain, the simple fact that we can ask ourselves these questions implies that at least once life has made it this far. So why not elsewhere? And in great numbers, millions of other times. I don't know about you, but as for me, I'd really like to see the mystery of the Great Silence solved in my lifetime. Unless we're dealing with the Great Filter hypothesis, or super predators, in which case, I'm really not so sure. If you haven't already, go check out their episodes. These ideas should stick with you for quite a while, until maybe one day we can finally settle the question. In the meantime, find me on Insta. I sometimes share some of my random thoughts there. And let me know in the comments which solutions to the paradox you find the most outrageous or the most believable.